Last night, if you were watching LiveNOW, you were hearing the breaking news that the Supreme Court late last night did grant the Trump administration's emergency appeal to temporarily block a court order to fully fund SNAP food aid payments amid the government shutdown. This came even though residents in some states had already received the funds. This is adding another layer of uncertainty to an already complicated situation surrounding food assistance for Americans. Will Weissert is standing by. He covers the White House for the Associated Press. Will, feeding people, just in general, feeding people seems like it would be a popular political decision. So why is the White House fighting to not fully fund SNAP? Is there nowhere else to get the money from?
Well, that's sort of the crux of it. I don't think anybody, either side, is opposing giving food aid. This is a program that helps about 1 in 8 Americans, right? So it's a big program. It's important to a lot of people. What the administration is saying essentially is that they can only fund it to a certain point, and they can only use money that's basically in contingency funds in other parts of the government because of the government shutdown. That they can't seek any new funds, and they can't sort of move money around to after a certain point. The thinking there, of course, is to sort of put pressure on Democrats and on Congress to try and reopen the government. That's part of the reason why you're seeing some of the flight delays you were talking about at airports as well. But when it comes to SNAP, it's not sort of opposing the idea of food aid. It's more about what sort of government levers can they pull during the shutdown and how far they're willing to go. And, as you noted, the decision last night doesn't mean the case is over. It's basically just going to give the full Supreme Court time to review the case, and they could still very well order the full payments to be made and the money to sort of be found. But for now, this is where we are, and it's another sort of pressure point.
President Trump has been urging Republican senators to terminate the filibuster. Why is this such a pressing issue for him? And where does this fit in, if at all, to the ongoing shutdown fight?
Well, I think it fits in a lot. He's been talking about, as you mentioned, for several days. It's really a non-starter. The Republican leadership has sort of said, we're not going to do this. We need this 60-vote threshold because if the Democrats ever got back in, they would pass immediately legislation making, Washington, D.C. a state and get 2 more senators that would, very likely be Democratic. They would do all sorts of things that the Republicans don't want. But President Trump calls it the nuclear option. He says that if, they threaten to change the rules, or if they did change the rules, they could immediately reopen the government. They could, use the Republican control of both houses of Congress and the White House to pass a lot of his, top, his administration's top goals and top legislative packages, and do it very quickly. And, he also sort of said if the Democrats want to do things like make Washington, D.C. a state, we should just do it ourselves so that they can't sort of beat us to the punch. But that's not really, the more he talks about it, the sort of more dug in, leadership gets and sort of says that, look, the votes aren't there, right? I mean, you need a certain amount of votes to sort of make this happen. And it doesn't have a lot of support on the Republican side or, on the Democrat side, really enough to sort of make it happen. So today was very interesting. He talked about another sort of option that might break the shutdown standoff about taking what are subsidies, federal subsidies to recipients of health care under Obamacare, under the ACA, and giving them directly to Americans, to insurance holders, rather than the companies that sort of provide the health insurance. That actually does have some support. There have been some Republican senators who have already come out and said, hey, let's try this. Let's talk about this. But again, that's another, sort of non-starter as it is. I think we're really seeing the president sort of talk about different things, sort of outside the box ideas to try and sort of break the logjam and get the government back open. But they are outside the box, ideas for a reason, because they're not likely to pass no matter what he says.
Is there any distance between how Trump would like to see this shutdown end and how GOP leaders in Congress would like to see this thing end?
It's a good question. I think that basically the White House's position has been from the start, they feel like this was a government shutdown created by the Democrats, that they basically voted to shut down the government, and that they don't feel any sort of need to negotiate and help the Democrats sort of fix a problem that they've created. That's what the senior administration officials have said sort of from the beginning. That's what the president has said. The problem is, of course, that Democrats now feel emboldened because they had big wins on Tuesday in the governor's race in Virginia and in New Jersey. And they really feel like this is a point where they've been able to sort of press their agenda and sort of stand up to the White House and to President Trump. And so they don't really feel a lot of political pressure anyway to end the shutdown because they feel like they're winning, and that they're making their point. The real sort of interesting thing will be to see what happens. You mentioned flight delays and sort of chaos at airports. On Thanksgiving week, that's amazing to really sort of scary to even think about, right? With the SNAP program, there are other things. Not paying troops. Lots and lots of federal workers not getting paid or being furloughed and not going to work even at the White House. Those are all things that probably can't go on forever. But I don't think you're going to see either the Democrats sort of anxiously coming to the table to make concessions, and the White House from the very beginning sort of said they don't want to do that either.
Let's talk about healthcare. Healthcare is at the crux of the shutdown. Let's rewind, if we can, back to the beginning of October. That's when the shutdown began, October 1st. The bill that cleared the House and eventually failed in the Senate, it came after Democrats demanded extensions for healthcare subsidies under the Affordable Care Act. That's obviously something that the GOP did not want to play ball with, Will. Why is it that here we are, nearly a month later, and neither side has been able to find common ground on this issue?
Well, again, I think the Democrats feel like they've got a salient issue here. They say that people are going to see their premiums go up, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a month. And they really feel like that's a sort of a kitchen table issue that's really important to people. And they would like to see a negotiation to sort of set in stone progress on this issue before they go and vote to reopen the government, because they feel like that's the only leverage that they have. Again, the results on Tuesday sort of emboldened them to feel like they're in a strong political position here. The position of the White House and of congressional Republicans, all top Republicans, essentially is, reopen the government and then we can talk about legislation, right? There's just no way to sort of hold everything hostage and try to get what you want when you don't have the votes. But the Democrats say immediately, like, as soon as we do that, you'll then renege and we will see these subsidies go away and people are going to suffer. So that's sort of the impasse that we're at. And, we're in day 40, right? And the Senate is in session this weekend. There was some hope that there might be some movement. They're still talking. And, eventually when a deal comes together, it can move very quickly. We might see an end right away. But it doesn't appear that we're anywhere closer, tonight than we were this week or when this started, really. The issues remain the same.
Will Weissert covers the White House for the AP. Good to see you. Thanks.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. The time in the nation's capital, 6:10. It is time for us to hit a quick break. We're going to be speaking with Reuters when we come back. Going to be discussing the airport situation as the nation faces more and more headaches relating to flight reductions, flight cancellations.